handouts. There's a message here on the screen that lets you know that there are some handouts. So if you'll look on your navigation bar, you'll see a bar that says handouts on that. If you click there, you'll find 3 documents that may be useful to you today as we move through the webinar. In addition, as we move with implementation in our own districts, as you provide support to teachers, those 3 documents will be useful to you. So we're encouraging you at this point, if you haven't yet had an opportunity to download those handouts, please do so at your convenience. So those are going to be a great resource for you as you move forward through the webinar and beyond. So once again, just a great big shout out and thank you to you each for taking time out of your busy schedules. Listen, we all realize the demands in your buildings each and every day, and you taking this opportunity to join us for this 1:30 webinar is certainly a pleasure and a delight for us. So thanks for being with us. This is part 3 in a series of webinars. So there's one more webinar to come next month. So we'll add an additional webinar next month that you can have an opportunity to get more acquainted with this formative assessment process as part of the NC-K3 formative assessment, a larger process, but KEA is a component of that larger process. So Nikki's going to advance the slides as we move through, so we're going to take a look at the next slide. All right, thank you, Nikki. So we're doing sound check right now. So folks, some of you have the ability on your dashboards to raise your hand. If you want to do that to indicate that you can hear us. If you want to put a message in the discussion there and just let us know. We've started the webinar now, so if you're struggling, you're not hearing us, you can type a comment there in the box. So that's what this slide is here to kind of help us assess our sound quality today. So I'm seeing hands raised, and let me take a look at the okay, so it appears that we're doing pretty well with our sound. We can hear. Thanks, Tammy. Great job. All right, so if at this point it appears that most are able to hear, so perhaps if you're on your own device and you are not able to hear, thank you, Jesse, just go ahead and take a look at your own device at this point and see if perhaps on your own device you have sound muted or the volume isn't turned up on your own device. So if you'll take a look at that on your personal devices for right now. All right, so it seems as if audio is in order. Once again, this is the 3rd in a 4-part series of webinars intended for instructional leaders. So the focus here today is going to be on how do you support your teachers. So thanks, Mary. So as you're thinking about supporting teachers, what kinds of things do we as administrators need to be thoughtful about and cognizant of as we move through providing teacher support? So we're going to move along with the webinar and get started here. Questions, we certainly encourage you. We want to let you know that there are some folks at the state agency there who are together. Dr. Screnzy is there, Amy Screnzy, whom most of you are very familiar with in this work, and Dr. Nikki Galloway. So those ladies are going to support as we move through this and answering questions. So we encourage you, if you have a question about something that we're covering at the moment that we're covering it, take the time, type your question in. Those questions will be answered privately in some instances. In other instances, if it seems to be a question that many folks are asking, we may, in fact, pause for a moment during the webinar and respond to those questions with the whole group. So certainly want you to be aware of that. As you're moving through this, please post your questions and we'll provide responses during the webinar. So there are 3 of us who kind of worked to prepare for this, and of course I'd shout out to Dr. Amy Screnzy because we could not have pulled this off without her. You all, we're field, we're out in the field, so the 3 faces you see there, those of us who are out there in the region doing the work with districts and supporting work with district implementation teams. Catherine Woodall represents the Northeast region. Myself, Donna Albaugh, Western region. And Nikki, you want to chime in here? And Nikki Galloway, Northwest. All right, good job. Thanks, Nikki. So what are we going to try to accomplish here today? Well, certainly with your support, we want to provide some coaching support, some ideas for you as an instructional leader as you're working in your building to support educators with implementation of the kindergarten entry assessment. I want you all to be really sure, thank you, Mary Beth, I want you to be really sure to think through your role as a coach. As an instructional leader in your building, and I'm thinking about myself having been a principal for many years, and thinking about my role as an administrator in my building with providing coaching support and encouragement to my teachers, providing resources. So there are many things that we're going to be able to do as instructional leaders in our building, and we're going to provide you with some tools to support you with that today. Provide you some guidance for PLCs, or professional learning communities, or professional learning teams as you work with your teams to implement this KEA. In addition, how can you provide some some support about how to use data? So that's an important part of this process. We're collecting evidence, we're looking at that evidence, making determinations, and listening that evidence, and then interpreting it, making decisions instructionally about how I can better support the learners in my classroom. How can you, as an instructional leader, guide that use of data during PLCs, have data talks with teachers to use this information to support student learning? That's the end goal. How do I adapt and respond as an educator to provide the best learning opportunity for the students that I serve? So this is a great process, so we're using that and building capacity district-wide. So we'll take a look at some reports as well as coaching tools. Those are our 4 major goals for today's learning. All right. So this particular definition of coaching, you can see here on the screen. I drew that from the AI Hub, the National Implementation Research Network. So if you've not heard of NIRN, I'm going to encourage you, take a moment and become more familiar with the work here of the National Implementation Research Network. This active implementation hub, so if you actually went to a browser and you typed in AI Hub, you will find NIRN, this organization through Frank Porter Graham, and you'll find lots of resources to help you develop the coaches perhaps that you work with in your building, develop your own coaching capacity. But I think it's really important for us to understand how important it is for that coaching to occur naturally, organically, as an embedded part of the professional development of the educators that you serve. So as you're working through the process of implementing any initiative that you're working through, even if it's a school initiative that you all have decided as a staff you're implementing, how do you provide coaching support? Because the research is clear. If I am, and this comes from, many of you are familiar with Joyce and Shower's work on coaching. When I'm coaching teachers, it's far more likely that I'm going to get the implementation and the level of practice in the classrooms that I'm looking for. So be sure that you're thinking through how you are building capacity as an instructional coach. Joyce and Shower's work in 2002 really provided a compelling case for the importance of skillful coaching. Joyce and Showers found that good training simply wasn't enough. I think we all know this at this point, so I can provide that great training session as part of our professional learning and professional development. However, without that follow-up coaching, demonstration, practice, and feedback, that coaching support really helps to provide sustainability for a practice and change teacher behavior. So we want to be aware of our role as coaches, as instructional coaches, as an instructional leader. So we're going to take a look at the next slide. and see what the implementation science that's behind this work, you all. And we talked in our previous about Dr. June Atkinson's message to state superintendents, and in general through MTSS, other initiatives that the state agency is working toward implementation of. We're really focused on using the frameworks, the structures of implementation science. So when you think about competency drivers, what you see circled here in red, what I want you to think about is it simply isn't enough to provide the training. When we think about competency drivers, we're looking for all 4 of these key critical components. We want to think about selecting, how do we go about selecting the folks who are part of that process that we're implementing, that implementation process. The training that we're providing and selecting the core personnel as a district implementation team who are probably supporting you with providing training to teachers for whatever it is that you're implementing. In this case, we're talking about kindergarten entry assessment or the larger NCK3 formative assessment process. The coaching that's being provided to your teachers as they're going through implementation of KEA in their classroom using the 5 critical components of the formative assessment process, to the point that we get to implementation to a point of fidelity. So all of those are critical aspects and competency drivers for effective implementation using implementation science. Coaching is key. All right, we're going to take a look at the next slide. Nikki's going to talk to you a bit about coaching during PLCs. Nikki?
All right, thanks, Donna. We're going to test our sound just one moment. If you can hear us, can you raise your hand or type something in the question box? We just want to make sure you can hear us on this end.
Oh, great. I see lots of hands. Excellent. Thank you so much. So again, this is Nikki Galloway. I'm going to talk just a few minutes about some coaching opportunities for principals and assistant principals related to your PLCs or PLTs, whatever your district calls those professional learning groups that we have in our schools. So one thing that we've been talking with some district teams about is ways that we can structure time during those PLC meetings to focus on the kindergarten entry assessment and to make connections between the new learning that teachers are doing about this and their practice. So this year, with the expansion of kindergarten entry assessment, teachers are learning some new construct progressions, right? So there are several new progressions that teachers are using this year that they didn't use last year. And so one thing that some districts are doing is focusing some PLC time on looking at each of those construct progressions separately in their PLCs and talking about the progressions themselves and the skill steps and what they're noticing. And then beyond just looking at the construct progressions together and talking about the content of them, connecting what it is that, that we're learning about in those construct progressions with current practice. So this screenshot that you see here is a continuation of the same document that was screenshotted in the previous slide, and you have access to that in your handouts. It's called the PLC agenda template, I believe. And so the first task that PLC teams can use is looking at the construct progressions, and then the next thing, planning for observation, asking this question, what am I teaching next week? And that is a really great question for teachers to think about this process as embedded in their daily classroom routines and lessons. So we're already teaching things related to these constructs, right? Kindergarten teachers are doing this work. So we think about the construct progression that we're learning about. We think about, what am I teaching next week? And when I'm teaching next week, when will I be able to observe for grip and manipulation, for example? Or when might I be able to observe for emotional literacy during a read aloud? So making connections to the practice. All right. And then getting feedback from our teachers. So this slide just shows an example of a feedback form that some districts are using, but it's essentially just a plus delta, what's going well and areas for improvement. And we've been asking PLC teams and building level teams to gather this feedback about the construct progressions and the formative assessment process, about the technology platform, and about the implementation science structures that Donna was just talking about, and record some of their the teachers' experiences around those things in this sort of this feedback form to provide this continuous feedback loop, so that district teams and your regional teams can provide information to building level teams, and then building level teams can provide that information back to us so that we know where improvements need to be made, and we know where the successes are. We know when teachers are finding this data helpful and powerful as they plan their instruction. So this is a really important piece for our coaching of our teachers. And then finally, many of you have probably seen this self-reflection form. This is a form that we have shared in some of our initial implementation last year. Some of you probably attended some of your regional meetings for implementing KEA. And this self-reflection form is for teachers to use to think about the 5 critical components of the formative assessment process and to what extent they feel like they are implementing those critical components. So here's how this can benefit you as an administrator if your teachers are using this self-reflection form or something like it. If you have teachers who are self-assessing with a form like this, and there are parts of the formative assessment process that they feel are still partially in place or not in place yet, those are opportunities for you to coach those teachers around that particular skill. So if a teacher says, you know, I've been able to elicit evidence, but I'm just still struggling with the interpretation of the evidence, it's partially in place, but I've still got some learning to do, then that's a coaching opportunity for you as an administrator to come in and support those teachers to improve in that area so that this data becomes really useful for them in their classroom and supporting their students. And this handout, the self-reflection handout, is another one that's available there in your handouts for the webinar.
And all handouts are available right now on the wiki as well. Some folks are saying that they're having trouble accessing one or another document. So in case it doesn't work right here, it is on that wiki address that was sent to earlier, where the webinar will also be placed once it's recorded.
Great, thank you. All right, Donna, I'm going to send it back to you to talk about some coaching tips for our administrators.
All righty, thanks so much, Nikki. So as you all know, there's so much going on in our buildings each and every day, and we generally have to make the use of every moment in terms of coaching and supporting our teachers. One way, as an administrator, that I used to find opportunities for this is to ensure that those items that we needed to be certain to cover as a team in terms of having conversations and building our capacity and our own professional learning within a professional learning team or professional learning network, was certainly to include those as agenda items. So I just put this screenshot here to have you kind of think about what are those regular agenda items as it relates to KEA and the implementation with your kindergarten teachers that might be important for you to ensure are being included at each meeting opportunity, so that those teachers can talk about what the barriers are that they're experiencing, what are the successes. In many cases, I'm in Western North Carolina right now and just work with a group, and the admins in the room were just sharing some strategies about how they're facilitating that in their own buildings. And some of the principals were sharing that it's important to include that as an item, every agenda item, and have teachers come together collectively and talk about evidences. So they're talking about the evidences that they're collecting. They're looking at reports. That's a piece we're going to kind of spend some time on today in this webinar. And in the same way today during our meeting, we took time to look at the various reports that are available. So as your teachers are gathering evidence, eliciting that evidence, uploading the evidence to the Teaching Strategies platform, interpreting that evidence, and making decisions about how to plan instruction and support learning for students, guiding their instruction. How do we go about that as a PLC, as a team of learners together? So thinking through using the reports that are available to you as an administrator, and we're going to take a look at some of those today, and Nikki's going to do some of that with you as well, that's important. So uploading evidence is a part of this work. So our teachers are gathering evidence. I had a district admin say to me, Don, we have evidence. Gathering evidence isn't at issue for us, but finding time to upload the evidence, that's one way that district leaders are sharing with me. They're working with PLCs on a regular basis to have time on their agendas during PLCs to look at evidence that's been collected, determine a status. Where is that student currently along a continuum, that construct progression, to make a status, and to spend time uploading evidence on a regular basis rather than waiting till I've got so much evidence collected to try to upload and make a status that it seems somewhat overwhelming. So chunking that during a PLC seems to be working well. Another way that I'm hearing from district leaders and principals is the variety of forms of evidence and ways that they're going about getting that evidence through an app. And if you want more information about how to use the app, we want to be sure that you reach out to your district, your regional consultant who can support you with that, and want to make sure that our teachers have their tablets, whatever devices they're using to upload evidence. If they upload that evidence through the app, it seems to make the work more efficient for our teachers, and that would be, if I was a principal again, that'd be one of the first things I would ask my teachers in a PLC is, okay, kindergarten teachers, bring your tablets, let's look at the tablets, make sure that you have the app and that you can in fact gather evidence and go through the process using the app to send evidence to the Teaching Strategies website, to the platform. So there's a variety of forms of evidence that our teachers are gathering. They can absolutely collect evidence using anecdotal notes. They could have audio recordings of the teacher and the student together, or just a student audio recording, and certainly video and photo evidence. We know that all of the evidence is secured. At no time would any of this evidence, when it's in our platform, it is a secure and safe space. So I want you to know that as well. So we're going to take a look at the next slide and think about, now we've got the evidence, and how do I get that evidence from that app? There's a variety of ways. Now, this is one thing I want to share with you. I'm working with one district here in the West, and a principal just made a decision. The teachers felt like it was somewhat cumbersome on their tablets to, finger peck and get the information into from the evidence app from a tablet. It's a little smaller, obviously. It's a little more challenging to navigate. So the principal's got them a stylus, a simple stylus to use when they're using their tablets to make that a little less cumbersome. So getting a stylus to help them record their anecdotal notes. Speech to text for recording anecdotal notes. Screenshots. I do have some of the folks that I'm working with, and we'll show you the grid sheets in just a moment, are using those grid sheets and having other folks within the learning environment. The phys ed teacher, I have one district that they took the school counselors are engaged in the process, and they're helping look at social emotional development of the students and planning learning experiences for students so that they too can support in the process of gathering evidence. Now, in these cases that I'm talking about specifically, teachers are using the grid sheets and they're taking screenshots. So in the bottom right you see screenshot as a way. They're taking screenshots of the data collection on the grid sheets and uploading that into the website from their app. So just another way for you to consider how to get evidence in the app from a tablet and make this a little more manageable. All right, so here are those grid sheets that I referenced. So this is just a screenshot of one of the construct progressions for language development, and it's following directions. So what you'll see is the teacher uses this grid sheet, and they're electronic. So in this particular screenshot, the word grids is hyperlinked, so you can get these. They're also, I uploaded them to the statewide wiki, so you can click on these grids, download them, push them out to your teachers. I would strongly encourage you to do this. In another district I was working with recently, the coaches saw these, so this particular district has instructional coaches at each building. The instructional coaches there took this opportunity, downloaded each of these documents, made photocopies for each teacher, and employed other stakeholders in the training so that the school counselor was aware of these construct progressions, understands the formative assessment process, other formative assessment process in terms of also phys ed teachers, just other stakeholders, PT, OT. There are other people who can support, make notes in the grid sheet, so they created grids for all of those stakeholders after they were trained, and they're all supporting in the process of collecting evidence. So this is one quick way to gather the evidence using these grids. One of my districts just simply calls it a tracking document. So all the teachers know, get your tracking documents and make sure that they go with you. So they're having multiple opportunities, just many opportunities and many stakeholders who can support with that work. All right, so we're going to take a look at the next slide. All right, thank you, Nikki. This is one of the tools I share with the group that we're working with today, and if I were a principal, again, this at-a-glance document also is available to you at the statewide wiki, at the statewide NC K3 FAP wiki space, which that URL has been provided to you all during this webinar. If you will go to the admin resource page, that's the first item listed there on the admin resource page, the most current copy of this. With the group I was with today, we just talked about various ways that we could use this document to have teachers think about in a quick glance each of the 5 domains of learning, the construct progressions that are aligned with the domains, and the skill steps along that continuum. It was a great opportunity for them to think about, as admins, had a group of principals today, to think about how this tool might be guidance for other stakeholders who need to better understand this work, because it's not just a kindergarten responsibility. We want all of our kindergarten teachers to feel like there are many stakeholders who can support you in this work. So during the meeting, they talked about how this tool might be used throughout their school building to support building capacity and understanding around this particular work. So great resource available to you on the statewide wiki for NC K3 formative assessment. All right, and Amy's already pushed it out to you all. All right, so now we're going to take just a moment and talk about reports. The report that Nikki's advanced the slide here, and we're taking a look at this first report. Now, what I'd like to share with you is that I have just again, I'm to shout out to some of the districts who are really engaged with this work. They understand the research, the rationale, and they believe in the importance of early childhood development and learning. And they're using this formative assessment process, the KEA, to really focus on strengths-based learning for children. So it's about what children can do. This particular report, I have a district in Western North Carolina who just recently, it's a year-round program, and they sent home midterm pupil progress reports for their parents. This is part of what they sent at midterm reporting to the parents. Now, this particular screenshot was taken from a training account, but the teachers can access this report. You as a principal can go in and emulate a teacher and access this development and learning report. It's an individualized report. It shows a student's current learning status along a continuum and where we're moving them to. It can be shared with families. It's a great resource to share with families, like some districts are already doing, that focuses on strengths and what the next learning target is along the continuum, that progression. So a really great resource. Your teachers have access to this under their reports tab, and you as an admin can go in, sign in, emulate a teacher, and under the reports tab have access to this same report. All right, we're going to take a look at the next report, also available. So under the Teachers Reporting tab, this is an individual child report. So this particular document is really useful to help show where that child is currently. You can run the report for one student at a time, or you can run individual reports for multiple students at a time when you're under the Reports tab. Again, your teachers can access this from their login on the Teaching Strategies website, and then go to the Reports tab and look for individual child report. Now, teachers can customize this report by reporting period as well as specific construct progressions. It's great for tracking an individual child's progress, for identifying strengths of students, and maybe some areas where teachers need to target some scaffolding of support for learning. It's a great documentation tool that might be used if I were to go to an MTSS meeting to support a child's learning. So it's another great resource that's available to you through the Reportings tab in the NC Teaching Strategies website from the online platform. So we're calling that the NC K3 Formative Assessment Process online platform. So you know what I'm talking about there. That's that website that you're going into. All right, we're going to take a look at another report. And this is the Family Conference Form. Now, this is a great resource for conferencing with parents. So you know that you have family conferences coming up, and you want to make sure that you have a report that can give them detailed information about what a student's doing currently. It's individualized. It can be customized. It provides a narrative report. It shows a student's current learning status and the next skill along the continuum. There are options to include within this report. You can actually see associated evidence, and it can be generated for a child. Also, you know, for once status summaries are completed, it will provide you with that information. It can be used with meeting families to discuss a child's current learning status and develop a plan to support students in moving along the continuum. So one more report that's available under the community. This one's under Communications tab, not Reports, so be clear on that. Also in the teachers login. All right, we're going to take a look at one more. All right, this is one that I find teachers most readily want to go to and talk about. So the report that you see a screenshot for right now is called the Class Profile Report. So what you want your teachers to do to access this is click on the Reports tab and then select Class Profile. They would select the status period, this, you know, what period they're addressing, so they could look at the types of statuses that have been included and generate a report from the right-hand side of the screen. It's great for showing current learning statuses or summary. And each student in the class is all, you'll see this is again a screenshot from a training account. And I might look at particular groupings of students, think about planning for instruction based on any of the constructs that you have included evidence, so you must have added the evidence into the platform. So as you look at the evidence, you've got a good sense of how your class is performing, an overall picture of where the class is currently performing. Another useful tool that I find many teachers like to use for planning and grouping students. All right, so those are just some of the reports that we wanted to draw your attention to today as you provide coaching support to your teachers as school administrators in the building. So how do you go about doing that? One thing that I just want to direct your attention to and keep you ever cognizant of as you're talking with teachers and coaching and supporting teachers is how are your teachers going about planning for formative assessment during their regular routines in a regular week. So thinking through how am I planning for formative assessment, having that as part of their engagement in their conversations when you're talking with them at walkthroughs. 5-minute feedback is something I used to like to do when I was a principal in the building, and it's really simple. Just making sure that when you're providing feedback that it's specific, it's explicit, and that you give teachers something that gives them an opportunity for growth, something else to attain. So I always provided positive feedback. Here's something I really felt like can be very explicit and specific. Sometimes I know personally, I'm just talking about me right now, feedback is generalized, it's not really specific, and if you really want to help move teachers forward, provide really explicit, specific feedback. So, and those are the variety of ways that you can do that. Keep the language and thinking about how are you planning for formative assessment. Thank you, Nikki. All right. So this document you all have seen before. We've presented it, and I'm being really honest with you right now, at each of the previous webinars we've done in this series. There's a reason for that. Why do we keep bringing you all back to the administrator practice profile? It's one of the documents that were available to you as a download, and it's also a document that's available to you on the statewide formative assessment process wiki. Why do we keep coming back to this in each webinar? Well, there's a reason for that. This practice profile really helps you as an administrator to know what expected implementation for each of those 5 critical components of the formative assessment process. What would I look for when I'm in a classroom? What kinds of questions might I ask students and teachers as I'm thinking through their implementation of those 5 critical components? The work here is really about formative assessment. We know that this is assessment that has a meaningful impact on student learning. It looks very differently from that summative assessment that so many of us are very familiar with, benchmark assessment. And this assessment has a place in terms of really guiding instruction. So how can you as an administrator provide support to teachers? Download this practice profile. As you're working through, you're doing your quick walkthrough, and you're leaving some feedback for teachers after a walkthrough visit. Look at the questions here and see if there's maybe a question that you can pull from this document that might help your teachers think through something that you would like them to move toward as part of expected implementation around the 5 critical components. So take the moments to download this one and really talk with your administrative team about that. Those persons who support you with building capacity for teachers in your building, make sure you all have a copy of this and that you're using this and developing that language, the understanding, your depth of knowledge around this work will be greatly enhanced as you work with this practice profile to better understand what it looks like in classrooms. All right. One more great resource for you to think about as you're coaching teachers. Thank you, Nikki. And then, finally, what I wanted to talk to you here with this particular slide is, You know, the work is all about whole child. We want to remain focused on whole child development. The research is clear. I don't know. I'm gonna throw this out at you all, and I did this today with the group I just closed a session with. Some of you may have seen there was a documentary that was done by PBS last Thursday night, pbs.org/NOVA, and look for the schools of the future. You all, it was a fascinating programming about the brain research. They had Carol Dweck on there. They had uh, Linda Darling Hammond was a researcher that they featured, and they really talked about the importance of early childhood development. You all, the brain research has really caught up to this work, and they shared how they were taking very young learners, and some of these young learners in the research documentary, and I'm paraphrasing for you here, but I want to make a point about the importance of us being attuned to whole child development. But what they did is they took students who were young learners who came from highly stressful environments. These were inner city students in many cases. In most cases, they were from high poverty environments. These students had, in many cases, one parent. And what they did is they took MRI, they took images of the brains of these young learners. And they put these young learners, after they had these like baseline brain images, and they looked at areas of brain development like Broca's area and Wernicke's and the amygdala that has a lot to do with emotion. And they looked at the development of the brains as a baseline at the beginning. They put these young learners in 5 weeks of intensive learning. Lots of support. Parents were a part. The parent was a part of that. And what they found was the areas of the brain that I just named had really increased in size. So take a look at that research for yourself. Whole child development, we've got to be talking about that across the continuum of grade levels in our buildings, not just kindergarten. And we really have to be talking about the 5 critical components of this formative assessment process. How do I manage that? Do it in chunks, like Nikki just talked to you about. In a PLC, take one of these areas and really unpack it and deeply come to a depth of knowledge around one piece of this slowly so that you can become more proficient as a team. All right, take a look at the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter. So you all, if you haven't had a chance, I'm currently seated in one of the districts where there are some phenomenal demonstration teachers. This information is available to you as well on our wiki, as well as the live binder. You can get this information very readily, and we can put this in the chat as well for you. But there are demonstration teachers who are opening the doors of their classrooms. Really, it's a great service that they're doing to other educators across our state. So they're opening the doors to their classrooms so we can come in and observe the great work they're doing implementing the NC-K3 formative assessment process, specifically kindergarten entry assessment, and there are some pre-K programs that are also demonstration classes. It's oftentimes a lot more powerful and impactful on your practice to see a model. These are great model classrooms. If you have the opportunity to make a visit, it's a guided observation, incredible opportunity to grow teachers, to let them see those models and provide feedback about how they too can find pathways to implement similar practices in their own rooms. So a great learning opportunity there. Coaching and support for teachers.
Thanks, Donna. This is Nikki again, and I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the reports that Donna just walked you through and how, as an administrator, you can use the information from those reports to support your teachers in your building. So the Formative Assessment Process online platform offers those summary reports that Donna was just showing. A variety of different reports are available there. As an administrator, you're able to look at teachers' individual accounts and see what data they are and what evidences they're entering into the system, right? So, but why would you want to do that? why would you want to look specifically at the kinds of evidence that a teacher is putting into the platform? Well, this is a great coaching opportunity for you to support teachers as they use that evidence to adapt and respond to the learning needs of their students. That's one of the critical components of the formative assessment process, is adapting and responding to learning needs. And as an administrator, if you look at what evidences teachers are putting into the platform and how they are interpreting those evidences, what learning statuses they're determining for their students, then you've got information for some great coaching conversations around next steps for those students. Planning their instruction, adapting to where the children are and where they are going next. So if we look back at this development and learning report that Donna showed you just a few minutes ago, this provides you a summary in the different domains of where the teacher is considering the student to be on a construct progression, and then what that next step is. I know it's a little hard to read on our slide here, but currently Alonzo does the thing that, whatever the learning status is that the teacher has determined, and then it says next Alonzo will sustain engagement in self-directed activities. So that's the next step on that construct progression that the teacher wants to support Alonzo in achieving. That's your opportunity to talk with the teacher about what kinds of activities are you planning for Alonzo? What other kinds of activities could we provide? Who else is at that same learning status with Alonzo who could be in a group with him to support that? And then the other thing is just thinking about, when we look at the evidences that teachers are entering into the platform, we can think about other coaching questions like, why have they selected certain types of evidence to enter into the platform? Why do they have a certain amount of evidence and why does that vary among students? All those questions relate directly to the formative assessment process, right? The point of the evidence that teachers are putting in the online platform is to inform their instruction. So all that you can do to support using that evidence to inform their instruction, that's the way to really coach those teachers to use this process effectively and really see that growth that you're looking for in those students along these construct progressions. So from here, I'm going to advance the slide, and we're going to hear from our colleague, Catherine. She's going to talk to you a little more in depth about that administrator practice profile and the look-fors and open-ended questions that you can be asking as you're engaging with your teachers in their classrooms.
Leadership is key. Both of these quotes emphasize the importance of leadership in the schools to teachers and to students' learning. We're going to share some additional tools to help during your support for teachers as they work on the K-3 formative assessment process. There are effective practices that support this formative assessment process. And teachers need a system of support from building administrators, coaches, and district leaders that allow them to take risks, to try new things, and to set up classrooms in new ways that will enhance the students' learning. These are the 5 critical components of the formative assessment process. All components need to be in place for the formative assessment process to be complete, and the components do not always happen in this sequential order. The K-3 formative assessment practice profile is an additional tool to guide administrators in their support for teachers. This tool is divided into sections that will provide explanations and examples for each of the 5 critical components of the process, things to look for, and open-ended questions to ask during your visits to classrooms or when talking with teachers, and descriptions of what it will look like when a teacher moves along the continuum to expected implementation of the formative assessment process. You'll have access to this tool as a handout, and it'll also be located on our wiki. I'm going to take a few minutes to unpack this support tool by looking at each of the 5 critical components one at a time. Eliciting evidence of learning. What can help me learn what the student knows? Teachers have a plan for collecting and storing evidence of student learning. Eliciting evidence occurs while instruction is taking place, and there are multiple assessment means that are both teacher and child initiated. During your work in supporting teachers, you could look to see if teachers create classrooms that support multiple opportunities for capturing the student's learning. Look to see if their planning documents show intentional opportunities for both child-initiated and teacher-initiated activities. Look to see if teachers are collecting student information and recording what students make, say, do, or write. Some of the questions that you might ask are, how does your classroom environment facilitate multiple ways to collect evidence? What are some ways you offer for students to show their learning? In what ways do you plan for the balance in teacher and child-initiated activities? Interpreting the evidence of learning. What do the evidences of learning tell me about this student? Before teachers use the evidence to inform their instruction, they will analyze the evidence and determine the current learning status for that child along the construct progression. If you're supporting teachers, look to see if they have documented evidence on the electronic platform and if they've determined the current learning status. Some of the open-ended questions that you might ask are, ask them to share an example of how you analyze evidence to determine a current learning status, or ask how they determine which evidence is helpful for adjusting their instruction. Adapting, responding to learning needs. Knowing this information, how can I respond to the needs of the student? Teachers use their evidence to make instructional choices, like modifying the environment or adjusting instruction. Teachers also provide feedback to the students. You would like to see teachers giving descriptive feedback to the students with discussions and suggestions about what the student can do to move his or her learning forward. The feedback could help the students answer questions like, where am I going? Where am I now? And how do I close the gap? You would look for one-on-one small group times when the teacher is talking with and showing students hints and clues on what they need to do to move their own learning forward. The teacher would be giving examples of modeling and demonstrating. Ask teachers how they show students what they can do to move their learning forward, or how do their students know what to focus on to meet the criteria for success. When it's appropriate, you can even ask the students, tell me about your feedback. What are you going to work on next? Selecting learning targets. What does the student currently know? What is the next understanding, skill the student needs to know? Selecting learning target focuses on the teacher having knowledge of where the students are, where they need to go along each progression. Sometimes these are stated in the I can statements. Some things to look for would be teachers working with individual or small groups to identify those learning targets, students engaging in activities that match their individual learning targets, or evidence of differentiation of students that match their learning skills. And you could ask teachers to explain how they selected the learning target for the student and how the student has been involved in this selection. You could also ask students questions like, tell me what you're working on, or what is your goal or target? Developing criteria for success. What will it look like when the student has learned the selected learning target? The teacher identifies the criteria for success and describes what students might make, say, do, or write to demonstrate that they've met the learning target. Teachers model what it looks like to reach the learning target and includes the students in developing the criteria. Focus on the teacher's ability to explain the process for using learning targets to identify and create criteria for success. You might look for one-on-one or small group meetings to create criteria for success. You might look for planning documents or reports from the electronic platform that show evidence of current learning statuses and identify next steps. You might ask, how do you model and provide practice for students? Some relevant questions for students are, how do you know what it looks like to meet your learning target? What else will you have to work on to complete your goals? Or how will you know when you have met your goals? In addition to the tool that we shared for administrators, there's a self-reflection tool for teachers. Self-reflection provides a process for teachers to reflect and evaluate, identify strengths and weaknesses, and then revise accordingly. This self-reflection tool guides teachers' thinking about each of the 5 critical components and whether their current practices are in place, partially in place, or not in place. Teachers will be at different places on their understanding of this formative assessment process. The administrators encouraging the use of the self-reflection tool can help teachers to identify the different types and level of support that they may need. We hope our review of support tools can enhance conversation with the teachers' efforts for using the K-3 formative assessment process. Remember to capture both positive happenings and recognize the areas that need additional support. The Glows and Grows document's a great way to lead this conversation. Also, maybe during the self-reflection, the teacher realizes they need support for observation and strength-based note-taking. They may also discover that they're really strong at modeling and giving feedback to students. Both of these can be helpful. Nikki and Donna shared several reports available on the electronic platform that provide great data for determining teachers' professional development and support needs. There are also multiple times that these tools could be helpful, possibly during PLCs, class walkthroughs, or doing individual conversations with teachers. We encourage you to give us feedback on additional topics and opportunities when we can support the work you do with teachers every day. This webinar information will be archived on our statewide wiki, along with the previous administration webinars. You can see the wiki address at the bottom of this slide, and we'll also put that address for you in the chat box. The next webinar for administrators is on Tuesday, October the 18th, from 1:30 to 2:30. Please join us again, and be sure to forward the registration information to any building level or district level administrator or coach that supports teachers in the K-3 formative assessment process. We'll put the registration of this link in the chat box.
All right, and now you see on your screen contact information for the regional consultants for the K-3 formative assessment process. Additionally, you just got the link to our wiki in the chat box, and on our wiki there's a document that provides not just the phone numbers for the regional consultants, but also email addresses. So you have access to that information on the wiki as well. We thank you for joining us today, and we hope that this was helpful as you think about ways that you can support your teachers in their classrooms as they learn about and engage in this formative assessment process. We hope that you'll join us for the next webinar where we conclude this series for administrators and provide you more information to help you with your support. Thanks and have a great afternoon.